This entire case really revolves around whose DNA was found on Allison Feldman's body and inside her home, and that was defendant Ian Mitcham. But the defense threw out a whole new theory today that Allison's pharmacist is her killer. The prosecution began with opening statements claiming Ian Mitcham brutally beat, sexually assaulted, and strangled Allison Feldman to death inside her own home in February of 2015. They say DNA tells the story. Years after the case went cold, a familial DNA match hit Ian Mitcham's brother, who was incarcerated, and after they obtained Ian's DNA, it was a direct match to the unknown DNA profile at the crime scene. The state also says Ian Mitcham's black Mustang was in the area at the time of the crime, and he deposited a large amount of money at a nearby ATM. But perhaps one of the more chilling aspects in the prosecution says Ian Mitcham spent hours cleaning the crime scene with bleach while Allison's dead and naked body lay in the hallway.
Her killer left with the daunting task of having to eliminate any evidence of having ever been inside her house. After the murder, he searched the kitchen, the laundry room, and the guest bathroom for items that he could find to clean the scene. He wiped and mopped up some of the blood off the floor. He sprayed down door handles and knobs of places that he had touched while he was inside the home. And he poured bleach over the crime scene, including over Allison's body and her dress, to try to eliminate any of his DNA. In fact, Allison's killer spent the next several hours inside her home attempting to eliminate any evidence that could eventually allow the police to connect him to what he had just done.
Next was the defense's turn for opening statements. They took a wildly different approach, saying Scottsdale police arrested the wrong man. They said Ian Mitcham was at his brother's house that night borrowing money due to financial troubles, which they say is what he deposited into that ATM that night. They say Allison Feldman's pharmacist was actually the killer, and that all other evidence in this case outside of DNA points to him.
Till July of 2016, the Scottsdale Police Department received information from another call from other parties that they had learned of some information or about James Casamides. And they told the Scottsdale police that he had made some concerning statements regarding the homicide. You're going to hear from his girlfriend that on occasion he strangled her. He also tackled her, pushed her into a fridge. And guess what? He lived on 87th Street in Osborne, less than a half a mile from the victim. You're going to hear how he walked the alleys at night. And of course, drank the same beer that was at the scene.
The prosecution says they already ruled out James Casamides as a suspect. The crime scene pictures today indicated there was a major struggle both inside and outside the home. Prosecutors showed graphic photos of that crime scene to the jurors. This trial is likely to last up to 6 months, and if convicted, Ian Mitcham could face the death penalty.
What a trial. I mean, DNA is a big part of the story, obviously. Was there any question about it in this trial?
Yeah, so DNA is everything in this. And honestly, all of that was a lot of new stuff today, but there was a lot of drama for years that led up to this point. So Ian Mitcham, the suspect here, the defendant, had a DUI in 2015. He had done a DUI test, a breathalyzer, and Scottsdale police had that DNA still in their system. He was supposed to have that gotten rid of after 90 days, but instead Scottsdale police kept it for 2 years. So when they got that familial DNA match to his brother, they went back in their system and said, we still have Ian Mitcham's DNA, let's just test it, let's use it. They didn't get a new warrant for that. That caused a huge issue. Yes, it was a direct match, but that should not have been allowed to happen. So this is why I went to the Arizona Supreme Court. The difference, though, is that Ian Mitcham committed more felonies and was convicted of them in 2022. So Allison killed in 2015, committed more felonies in 2022. Inevitably, his DNA would have eventually matched the crime scene. It's something called the law of inevitable discovery. And that is how DNA was ruled admissible in this court case. They would have gotten it eventually, but did Scottsdale police do something wrong and how they stored it? Yeah, they did, and the Supreme Court said that. So that was a whole dramatic situation leading up. Is DNA going to be admissible or not? That is the crux of this case for the prosecution.
The pharmacist aspect of it. I was reading your script and I thought, wow, okay, didn't expect this one.
No, not at all. That was completely new information to me as well. And basically, the defense said that DNA does tell who it is, but they kind of went on the notion that DNA doesn't explain how, doesn't explain when. Yet the prosecution says DNA tells everything. So it is interesting. This is a really wild case, expected to go for nearly half a year.
6 months.
Yep.
All right, you'll be on it, Briana.